Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to I Am Success with Trilina Sharon. Listen, I'm late again. Again, I am late. Listen, I am working on this ability to be consistent, and it's not stemmed in, me not wanting to be consistent. But it's more so rooted in, I think, this area of discipline that God is really working on me in my time of transition, even now, right? That's one of the areas where I think, the Lord is like, okay, we've got to get you to a certain level of discipline. Now, hear me out. I am, in many ways, a disciplined person and have been disciplined. But I think in the season that I'm in right now, where I've taken time to rest and I've what does that mean? And I've set my schedule up to be really, really flexible and to just work in my favor or whatever. Yeah, I've gotten pretty relaxed. I'm not as forced to be regimented in my day as much as I used to when I used to be in corporate America. And I'm, a couple of years removed from that now. But listen, when you go through transitions and navigating, you got to know what season you're in and what's required in each season. So while when I came out of corporate America, there was time for me to rest and to be a little less regimented. In fact, I think the Lord was pushing me into that at certain periods, but I am no longer there. And I gotta get my discipline back up, and I need to be consistent. And so I'm working on it. And my hope is that you all would pray for me. Now, listen, I done got into some things, and I need to tell you all to subscribe to the channel, like this video, share this video with as many people as you can. Get people engaged and connected to I Am Success with Trilina Sharon. I believe that there are a number of topics and different things that we will talk about in the coming weeks, months, and however long I'll be on this platform. But I'm so excited about building this platform with you all and growing together, and being able to connect and listen, us just be successful and thrive in whatever it is that God has given us to do. And my hope is that there are conversations and tips that come through that will help you in your own personal journey, right? And so I want you to get connected because I have some great things that are coming up that I'm really, really excited about. And I hope that you are as well. But listen, I need you to subscribe. I need you to like. I need you to comment. I need you to tell me, are these conversations or these things that I'm talking about, are they helpful? Are there certain things that you want to discuss that have to do with being successful according to God's plan for your life? I want to know those things so that we can talk about them, right? As the Lord leads, obviously, because I'm led of the Lord in everything that I do, okay? But yes, so again, welcome back. If you've been here before, welcome. For those who you're just now catching wind of I Am Success with Trilina Sharon. I'm so glad that you decided to hop on your electronic device and watch this video. Okay. So today we are continuing to talk about transitions. So this month, that's kind of what was given to me, that we would be talking about transitions. And so I've had different conversations about different things as it relates to transitions. But today I want to begin this conversation about getting to the end of yourself in your transition and how that means something different depending on what kind of transition you're in, what it may look like. I mean, I've been through several transitions, but I think the most helpful ones are going to be some that I've experienced later in life in the most recent years, partially because as I've navigated through those transitions in the later years, I've had a God perspective. And so I want to make sure that I'm bringing in the God perspective or bringing that out in these videos or in this video so that even for yourself, as you're going through your transition in real time, you can approach transition and even think about what getting to the end of yourself means from with a God perspective, right? So I want to talk about this specific time in my journey where I was going through a major transition, even in kind of the way that I was approaching my life or thinking about my life, my impact in the world. What am I in the earth to do? The year 2020, many remember that there was the world was in a crazy time, right? Because we were experiencing the pandemic, and our lives were like turned upside down, right? And so during that year was a very critical year for me in many ways. So spiritually, there was a deepening in my relationship with God that I experienced, and what was uncovered during that time was that what I was doing in terms of my career was not what I felt like I was supposed to be doing. Right. And so I started to lean into that. And so I'll go ahead and say this, that in June of 2023, I left corporate America. So I'm now two years removed from leaving corporate America. But that didn't start June 2023. It started back in 2020, right? Where the Lord started to just show me that there was something different that he had created me to do in the earth. And so as I continued to lean into that, there was a process. There was a process of transition that began in 2020. And I'll say it didn't necessarily end in 2023. That's just when in the natural, I physically left corporate America and started to do some other things. But this particular transition, like I said, it began in 2020, and the Lord started to show me, Trillina, there's an impact that I want you to have, and I want it to be for the kingdom of God. And so I had a knowing that I would leave corporate America, and eventually I would go into doing something for myself in terms of entrepreneurship. And so that would also couple with kind of ministry to some degree, but not formal ministry, right? In the way that we think, if you are a believer and you attend church regularly, you have a regular ministry that you are part of, when we think of ministry, a lot of times we think of, pastors and ministers and those who serve in organized religious spaces. And so while that is something that I was also doing, right? At the time, I understood that this particular thing that God would have me to do would not necessarily look like that. And so I didn't really know what it was, but I just kind of was leaning in and just moved. I think in 2020 was when I first started to build my own website, right? And I didn't know where I was going with it, but I got on Wix and I'm like, let me build a website. What do I want to do? And so I was just kind of playing around. And so at the time I was working for this IT services company. I was in upper management and probably at the highest point in my career, according to what the world would suggest in terms of, financially, and even, in terms of organizational structure, where my seat set, right? I had teams that were reporting to me. I was leading other managers in different capacities. And so I was making, a nice six-figure salary. And so, many people would say, hey, you're at a really great point in your career and there's opportunity for you to continue to grow. Right. And so that may have been very true. But at the time I started to realize, like, this is not what I want for my life. I don't desire this. I feel out of place. I started to be very unhappy in the conditions that I was working in. And so I just kept leading into the Lord so that he would give me instruction. So I remember the following year, 2021, it's kind of in the early parts of the year, I was just really in a frustrated place because I'm like, okay, God, I'm ready to be done with this. Like, I'm sick of this place. I'm really, I'm over it. what's next? Like, I need you to show me what's next. Okay. And so I'm having these conversations with the Lord, and I don't know if you've ever been at a point where you've been so sick and tired of where you are. Almost like I would drive to work and I would be in tears because I was so over it. I was over it. But at some point, and I can't remember exactly what happened, at some point, there was a peace that came over me that God had heard my prayer, that the movement out of that place was getting ready to happen. Like, there was a knowing, and I held on to that knowing, and I just was at peace. I was at peace. So I would go to work. I would still do what was required of me. I would still show up, and encounter those that God had put in my life at the time to encounter, even on the job, because I had impact in certain people's lives at the time. And one day, out of nowhere, I get a phone call from a health system, and they came across my resume, and they wanted me to interview for a position. And so it was interesting because I had never applied for this position. In fact, I was a person who said that I would never work in healthcare. It just wasn't my thing. And I did not know that the skill set that I had was even a thing in the healthcare industry, right? So it was really divine in how that worked. But I ended up going through this interview, and everything went well. There were so many things about this position in this healthcare system that were divine, right? There's no way that God did not orchestrate this opportunity for me. And so I moved into that position. I ended up leaving the organization I was a part of. I moved into that position toward the end of the year. In fact, it was December of 21. Moved into that position. It was a step down in pay. It was a step down in responsibility. I no longer had direct reports, even though I was leading teams. And the role that I had, I was leading teams, but in projects, right? So they weren't directly reporting to me, but I was just helping them make improvements in their particular areas for the health system. And so when I moved into that position, I knew, right, that this was a God thing. So I continue I work the job, and I'm, doing what is required of me. I'm enjoying not having these direct reports. And I'm also asking the Lord, okay, well, what's next? So here I am, ready for the moment that he says, we're done with this. And if I'm honest, my thoughts were that in this particular role, because I didn't have the direct reports, because my position was not as demanding, okay, I felt like, okay, the time that I need to do some of this other stuff has been made available to me. And I thought initially that I would be in that role for several years, right? Knowing that it was a step down, but that there would be, several years before I would step into the next. And in fact, that was not the case. That was not the case. The very following year in 2022, I felt the Lord begin to speak to me, or at least my spirit started to feel like, okay, this is coming to an end quickly. And so again, by December of that year, I felt this unction to go on a fast, because there was like this knowing that I needed to prepare for another move, right? Now, I'm talking about this transition from being in corporate America into out of corporate America, like leaving corporate America. But as you can tell, within that, there were smaller transitions, and some people would even consider those large, because moving from one organization to another is a large transition within itself. Moving from having direct reports to having no direct reports is a huge transition within itself. Moving from having a 6-figure salary down to a 5-figure salary, it was still very close to 6 figures, but there was a significant change, significant difference in what one salary was to the other. And so, even going from, IT to healthcare. Like those are other transitions that are happening in the midst of this larger transition that's taking place. Okay. And so there's so many adjustments that I needed to make. And in my mind, by that point of my life, I had navigated through so many transitions. By that point of my life, I had navigated through, like I said, parents divorcing, losing a father, my father at a very young age, becoming a teenage parent, having to graduate high school early because of that. Getting married. By that time, I'd been divorced as well. Like I'd been married for 10 years and divorced. I think at the time I was still getting my bachelor's degree. So that's a whole different conversation. And we'll get into that in a later video. I want to give you all some insight when I get to the end of this conversation today. But I navigated through so many different transitions already in my life that to many would have felt very significant. And they were. I don't want to minimize these transitions. They were very significant. But there was a bigger transition that was taking place. Like God was taking me through something larger, which was being a part of corporate America to leaving corporate America and really getting into what I believe I'd always been intended to do in the earth. Okay. Now, I'm still talking about getting to the end of yourself. I haven't gotten into that yet, but give me a little bit of time. I'm gonna get there. So I'm working in healthcare. It's 2022 and I'm feeling this unction that the close of this season is coming as well. And so by December of that year, I'm in a fast. I'm praying and I'm asking the Lord, okay, what are we doing? When is this time coming? Right? Because I felt it because I had felt this feeling before, I knew that it was coming. And so I remember having a conversation with my boss at the time, like, hey, I'm feeling like the time is coming. I'm not saying it's today, but I feel like the time is coming and I want to give you a heads up, right? And so that was a conversation I had. I actually also had a conversation with my mentor. And let me put a pin in it, right? Pin right there. It is so important for us to have mentors, for us to have people who have wisdom, for us to have leaders in our life who we can go to, talk to them about what's going on, what we're feeling, what we're sensing, and unpack some of that and allow them to give us feedback and to pour into us and to share their wisdom. And I'm not telling you to find somebody that just wants you to do what they want you to do, but somebody who can give you perspective, okay? So that you can be led down the right path. So you can make some wise decisions, right? And so I remember having a conversation with my mentor, and she had been in this place before where she left corporate America and to go into full-time ministry herself. And hear me, I wasn't saying at the time that I was going into full-time ministry. I was just leaving corporate America to do what looked like ministry, but then also to be an entrepreneur. So talking to her, and she gave me some feedback. And so with that, I went back into prayer. And what I felt like the Lord was saying was that there was a little bit more time, right? That I would be working, that it wasn't quite time for me to leave that position. And so I continued to do that. And I remember into 2023. So now we're in 2023, January 23. I had officially, because I was working on some things, right? So I had officially launched my coaching business, okay? And so I had coaching clients and I was doing coaching calls and all of this stuff. And so, I'm like, God gave me this business. And so I know he's going to blow on it and it's going to just blow up and all of the things are great, right? So I remember praying, I want to say it was... I started praying again about leaving, like around the March timeframe. I remember the company hired a woman who, it was almost like the minute she got hired, I knew she was my replacement. And what I mean by that is they didn't hire her to replace me. They hired her to be a part of our team. But I knew that she was the person who could take on the projects that I was working on, who could lead the teams that I was leading at the time. It was just this knowing. And so I started to pray about this thing again. And I remember getting to the point where I felt almost similar to how I felt when I was leaving the previous organization, where I was so crying like I didn't want to go to work and all these things. Now, hear me out. this wasn't a bad environment. I mean, in fact, it was a really great role. I worked with great people. But it's something about knowing that you're not doing what you were created to do. Once you have some level of awareness, right? Once you have some insight on what God has actually created you to do, it is the hardest thing to keep doing something that you know you're not supposed to do. And so that's kind of how it felt. It wasn't like I was in a bad environment. I just knew that, it was time for something to shift. So I was praying, and I remember getting a date. I got the date June 30th, and so I started to prepare for that. I remember giving my 30-day notice, and I'm moving on. And so in my mind, I'm like, all right, Lord, I'm being obedient. I'm doing the radical thing. I've got crazy faith. I just launched a business 6 months ago, but I know that you're going to breathe on this because this is a God thing. And so I leave the organization and I go into being a full-time entrepreneur. I'm excited. I've got, great clients, and things are continuing to move forward. But here's the challenge. I didn't start making money for real. I was making money. Let me be clear. I was making money, and bless the Lord, right, that I was making money early on in my business. But it wasn't enough to sustain me. It wasn't enough to pay my bills. It wasn't enough to make sure that we had everything that we needed. It wasn't enough for me to live the life that I had become accustomed to living, right? And so I remember feeling really, really frustrated about this. Like, oh my God, what's up? Now, when I left corporate America, I remember saying these words. I remember saying, all right, great. I'm going to, God's going to breathe on this. But if this doesn't work within the next 6 months, by the end of 2023, then I'll just I'll go get me a job, and, we'll reset, right? Because I'm like, I got a great resume and things are going to be awesome. So, yeah. Things didn't go the way I wanted them to. They didn't go the way that I thought they would in terms of the business blowing up and the money start rolling in, right? And me easily, transition into being this amazing entrepreneur, this amazing coach who's making thousands of dollars in impacting the lives of others. That's not what happened. So by the end of the year, I'm like, okay, God, I've got to go back to work because I had prepared a little bit for being off for a period of time, but with the mindset that during that time, I would also be making more money, and each month my income would increase through my business. And unfortunately, I get to the end of 2023, and that's not what happened. In fact, I think my clientele remained pretty consistent. My income maybe went up a little bit month to month, but not significantly enough to really mention. Okay. And so I'm like, God, what are we doing? Because I'm moving into now 2024, and I don't know what's up. So I move into 2024, and I begin to put in applications for jobs, and I'm asking the Lord, can I work or can I go back to work, and all of these things. And let me make a long story short. No, I couldn't. All of 2024, even though I did not sense, I'll say sense, because there's different ways that we hear from the Lord, but I didn't have this sensing that the Lord was like, go back to work, put in the, your resume at these organizations or whatever, so that, I could begin to make the money that I was once making and, have this, comfortable life or whatever I was looking for. But I didn't know, right? So I'm trying to figure out, because this is what I was accustomed to doing, figuring it out. I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, what can I do that will allow me to not only continue to, work the business, be the entrepreneur, but by that time I had increased responsibilities in doing kingdom work in terms of, organized religious spaces. I had roles in that, and I needed to be able to continue to do what I was doing, but also bring in income. So I'm trying to put in for jobs and I'm doing all the things and I'm not getting any calls back. Nobody's hiring me. I'm getting emails back like we decided to go with different candidates or whatever the case. And I'm finding myself frustrated. And I go through the entire 2024. Now, hear me out. 2024 was a great year. A lot of things happened. I launched a book. I released a book, which I want to bring that up here in a little bit as well. But I released the book. I, had this great coaching program that was going on. So I was helping, a lot of women. It was the beginning of what I now have, which is a ministry, which is a full-blown ministry. I had Thrive Weekend 2024, which was an amazing retreat that I hosted. But even in all of the great things that were happening, I was still going through this struggle of being able to financially provide for myself the way that I thought I should be able to. Okay. And so, Thrive Weekend happens, which was a retreat that took place in September. It was a great event, but I ended up sowing a seed into that event that I did not necessarily receive a return on financially. The great coaching program that I had going on, which was a 9-month program, came to a close. And then we had the last 3 months of the year, and I'd come up with these great coaching programs, and I had really low registration. So 2023, the business is doing pretty good for a first year coaching business. I've got clients, I'm bringing in funds. 2024 was kind of consistent, with 2023. But then by the end of 2024, I'm losing clients. I am losing income, and not because of anything bad, but people's situation changes, right? So they can't necessarily make the same commitments that they were once making, and I was not necessarily growing in my clientele, or at least my visibility. And so I'm like, God, what's really going on, right? And I'm frustrated. And there's so many things, right, that's happening at this time. But I remember toward the end of the year is coming, and I am creating a new program for 2025. And I'm like, okay, I got to get some people in this new program, right? 2025. So I've done all this work, and I'm promoting those last 3 months of the year. I'm promoting this great program that's coming in 2025. It's going to bring community and all of these things that we're going to do. We're going to have retreats, and we're going to do all of these great things. It was a great program. But the top of 2025 comes literally January 1, and I had no registration. 0 registration. Hear me. That had never been my situation. I always had people register for my programs, or whatever I was offering, workshops, whatever I was offering, there was always somebody who was registered. I had 0. I had some people who said they wanted to, right? They were interested and they would be, but I had 0 registration at the top of the year. And I remember that very day, I'm having a conversation with a woman who is a really good friend of mine. She's in fact a part of my ministry. And so we were talking, and out of nowhere, the Holy Spirit just kind of comes into the room and overtakes me. And so I fall to the floor, and the Lord is speaking. And he tells me that that my business, that particular program, I would not be doing. That there would be a shift in my business. And he shares a few other things with me. And, I am in tears, and I'm like, okay, God, how am I going to take care of myself? And, he's speaking. But it was like, okay, God, I don't know what you are doing in this time or in my life, but how am I going to be able to live if I can't do these things that you have given me, that I believe you've given me the creativity and the insight to do, right? And I'm gonna tell you something. Even in that, I still struggle, because I'm like, God, what are we doing? Y'all, this is the top of 25 this year. This is what, August? This is the top of this year. So over the last couple of years, there has been a lot going on. Okay. God has sustained me in it all, right? I've not skipped a beat, is what some people would say. Yes, my life has been skinnied down to some degree, but for a reason. So here's to get into the end of yourself part. Let me get into that. So I have experienced a life where God has shown up in a mighty, mighty, amazing, phenomenal way. Okay. To the point where, looking from the outside in, you would have been like, what? Right? Like, this is bananas, how the Lord has shown up and has poured out his blessings and has opened doors and has elevated me and has allowed me to experience all of these amazing transitions. Now, hear me out. Each one of them been hard. Okay, they've been tough, because there's things happening in transition that are they don't feel good. But from the inside, there was something that I was missing. And it has taken a number of things, or I'll say, these last couple of years, not so much in the last several months, because I've gotten it, but it has taken time in order for me to get it. And even in me teaching it to other people, I hadn't quite got it, right? And what is it? It's getting to the end of myself. While I was in corporate America, I was, in school. I was, working obviously full time in my career. I was in school full time. And that's a whole conversation that I don't have a lot of time to get into. I was in school full time. I was a single mother, right? Because I had been divorced, had 3 sons who were active in sports and all of the things, and I was able to show up for them. And there was a grace that was released unto me during that period of time for me to be able to do all of the things that I was doing. But in that, the Lord continued to elevate me. I would get new positions, and there would be an increase in my finances. And there was always this level up. And let me tell you something. When I think I mentioned a bit ago that, a little earlier in the video, that when I was working at the IT systems company and I was at the peak of my career, at least by the world standard, I was still working on my bachelor's degree. I didn't even have a bachelor's degree, and I was in management, and I was leading other managers, and I was leading teams, and I was making, 6 figures plus. And what I could not see was that God was showing me that he would make a way, that he was going to be the one, thank you, Holy Spirit, to make the way. That it wasn't about my abilities. It wasn't about my credentials. It wasn't about how much I knew. It wasn't about how good my brain was. It wasn't about my resume that was going to open doors for me. It wasn't about how great of a program I could create. Oh my Lord. It wasn't about all of these things. It was about God. It was about his unmerited favor. It was about him showing me that he was paving the way for me, that I was living a supernatural life. And as long as I would remain tapped in, as long as I would believe his promises, as long as I would get to the end of myself and remain at the end of myself, understanding that, baby, it ain't me. But that when God has a plan for your life and there is a place that he's taking you, right? If you would just lean in to him, then he's going to do what is required to get you there. Now, I'm not saying that it's not a hard journey, because, baby, not relying on my resume that I had worked so hard for, at least that's what I thought, was bananas. But every time I tried to go get a job to do what I thought I was qualified to do, baby, either they didn't respond or the answer was no. And that's because God has been preserving me for something else, to do something else, to impact in a different way. The journey that started in 2020 wasn't about me launching my own coaching business and me getting to the bag. Okay. Now I got some get to the bag tips. But it wasn't about me getting to the bag. It was about me allowing God to make me, and thank you, Holy Spirit, make me and mold me and work out the parts of me that want to satisfy my flesh, work out the parts of me that want to look successful according to man's plans, right? According to Western civilization, the parts of me that thought that success looked like making a lot of money, the parts of me that thought, man, that I with my intellect and my knowledge could reach somewhere further than where God could take me if I would just lean on him and believe in him and trust in him and work his plan. Okay? Listen here. In these times of transition, what's really happening, every time we get ready to level up, right? Every time we get ready to experience elevation, every time, there's many things that go on, but one of the primary things that's happening is God getting us to the end of ourselves. It's him showing us. Now I'm talking about if you transition in with the Lord. I'm not saying when you're doing it by yourself, but it's God trying to get us to realize that he has a plan for our lives, and it is for good. It's to give us a future and a hope and not want to harm us. It's like he's trying to get us to get to the end of ourselves, understanding that all things are working together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And so when we get in the flow of his purpose for our lives, right, the thing that God always intended us to do when we're seeking the kingdom and his righteousness, right, everything that we need will be added unto us. And if we would just let go of what we think that's supposed to look like, if we would just let go of this need to satisfy and please my flesh man, if we would just rest in him and knowing that he's consistent. Baby girl ain't been able to be consistent yet with this YouTube. I'm working on it, y'all. Don't come for me. But God is consistent. He is not a man that he should lie. Oh my. His ways and his thoughts don't look like ours. They don't even make sense to us, right? But in God, they make perfect sense. And so I want to encourage you, this video is a little longer than my other ones, but I'm hoping that you've gotten to this point, right? I want to encourage you that no matter where you are in transition, no matter what you're transitioning into, if it is a God transition, the thing that you've got to be looking for is, how do I get to the end of myself? God, where am I still focused on pleasing me? Where am I still focused on getting what I want out of this thing? How do I get to the end of myself so that I can go ahead and cross on over? Right? And when you get ready to test me in the crossover, how do I prepare for that so that I can pass the test? Because I'm going to tell you something. As long as you are still hung up on self, and what self can do, what self wants, what self can bring to the table. Have y'all ever heard of, now I don't know if it's only women watching this channel, I would assume so, but you know how you get into a relationship with, well, maybe you don't, but I'm gonna just say this. There's been a lot of conversations about men and women getting into relationships, and one of the questions that sometimes is asked is, what do you bring to the table, right? And I've heard different schools of thought when it comes to the men, right? Some of them are like, it don't matter what you bring to the table per se, physically, right? And I'm talking about when it comes to, you know, financial things and the things that you need to sustain the household or the family or whatever from that perspective. Because obviously, you know, when we're talking about relationships, wives need to show up as wives, right? They don't show up as women and that's it. They need to show up as wives. Different conversation. Maybe that's one that we can have one day, but it ain't this video. Anyway, if you're dealing with a man, right, who understands his role as a man, as a husband, as a provider, as a covering, okay, he is not about to be like, well, what do you bring to the table? Okay, because he wants to cover you. He wants to take care of you. He wants to provide for you. He understands that the value that you bring to the relationship is not necessarily in how much money you can make. Now, I'm not suggesting that women shouldn't be able to make money. Okay. Trust me, that ain't what I'm suggesting at all. I'm not suggesting that that's not helpful to the relationship or to the goals of that relationship. Every relationship is different, right? And we got to navigate that, you know, within the unit, whatever works for that relationship. But what I am saying is, a real man who understands who he is in God, his role as the husband, that's not necessarily what he is coming to the table asking the woman, right? And so it's like that. God is our covering. He's our provider. He is everything. He don't need what we bring to the table to open up doors for us. He does not need what we bring to the table to make it happen for us. You know how some people say God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called, right? That's the reason why your credentials are never going to be the thing that gets you in the door with the Lord. Now, he may use your credentials once he walks you into a place. I'm not saying he won't use that, because all things work together. But your credential ain't the thing that's going to qualify you, right? It's going to be your obedience. It's going to be your level of trust in him. It's going to be whether you can move when he tells you to move, right? And so my encouragement to you all, those of you who are watching, who are in a place of transition, you know that I'm in a God transition, and you're trying to figure out, you know, what's the next step? Because sometimes during periods of transition, we can feel stuck. My encouragement to you is ask yourself, ask the Lord, where do I need to get to the end of myself at? Where am I at? What have I not given over to you, God? What are you still trying to work up out of me? Because baby, a lot of times it's in that. If you find yourself held up in the midst of transition, it is in that. And so I encourage you all, get to the end of yourself. I thought I would have time to tell another I don't want to call it story, but talk about another transition that I've taken in my own life. But I don't. I mean, we already almost at 40 minutes, and I do not want to get any longer than this. But here's what I do want to say. I want to say, make sure that you come back. I'm going to do my best to have a video posted by Friday, right? Before we walk into September, because there's some things that I want to talk about that's coming. I am looking to likely starting in September begin to walk through my book and pull out some points of strategy, some different things that I think will be helpful to all of us who are looking to be successful. So I wrote a book that was released in January of 2024 called Becoming Kingdom. And man, it's interesting because even I think last year, someone or several people have asked me, hey, when are you going to do a book club or a book study or something like that, right? With this book. And I was just kind of like, I don't know, I do, but I think the time is now. I think the time is now for that. And so I believe in September, that's something that I want to do. I'm hoping that you all will be willing to join me. If you are one who you're already thinking, yes, I want to join in. I want to walk through that book with Trillian Sharon. I want to unpack some of the strategies and tools and tips and all of the things that maybe she talks about in this book along with her. I encourage you to go to Amazon and look for Becoming Kingdom by Trillian Sharon. And go ahead and order your book. If you don't have the book already, go ahead and order your book, because we will likely get started in that first Friday of September. And potentially I might, try to go live. We'll see what that looks like. But for sure, we will be talking through, the details about how we're going to get started in that on this coming Friday. So that you all can be ready to walk through this book with me. I hope that you will join me. I'll be posting some things about it on my other social platforms so that you all can be prepared, right, as we walk through this book. It's the thing that the Lord put on my heart, and so I think it's going to be very powerful for those of you who will join in. So anyway, make sure that you share the channel, listen, like, comment, definitely subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you can be notified when I post content here. Like I said, eventually I want to begin to post more. I actually did post a video last week. But anyway, yeah, so I'll see you back here on Friday. We've been talking about transitions. I hope that obviously we haven't talked about all the things that are related to transitions, but I want you to be encouraged as you navigate through your own. Listen, we in this together and we are success, baby. All right. Peace.